Welcome back to the Frontier Faith Podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jeff. And today we're going to talk about Acts chapter 17, and we're going to look at Paul and his journey in Athens. At the time of this recording, this is a text that I'm going to be preaching in Anchorage tomorrow. And this is one of my favorite chapters, one of my favorite sections, because you see, as Paul's going on this journey, you see him really have some inner tensions with what he's seeing in Athens. And so there's a story I think would be great to share to begin this episode that I'm planning to share tomorrow, where I heard this story of a guy who was a missionary. I don't know how long he was over there, but he's been a missionary in Nepal. And he was sharing at Harding during one of our chapels his experience and how God brought him over there. And it was not a typical missionary burden or experience that you might hear where someone's like, I really want to be a missionary for a long time, and they raise money and they raise a team and there's all this planning. He was just over there to visit. I think he was visiting a friend, but he was just over there temporarily. And the missionary that was already there was telling him, he said, hey, Greg, why don't you wake up with me and we'll have a devotional, we'll have some worship, 5 o'clock in the morning. He said, okay, let's do it. So they have some time of worship, they sing, and they have some time of meditating in scripture. And then they go down to the marketplace there where they see the neighborhood and their morning ritual of worshiping like hundreds of these different Hindu gods, these little statues of different sizes and shapes. And so they would have this pattern like day after day after day. And the missionary, they'd worship the true and living God, and then they'd go and see this other worship experience. And then they go home and they have, the rest of their day. And at the end, the missionaries just questioned. It was like, what do you see and what are you feeling? And Craig was just saying he just feels this burden. He just feels this frustration, feels this anger about this false idol worship. That you have your own worship, and you go and you see this, these neighbors bowing down to these false gods. And so then this guy had this question that led him to being a missionary now for years there. And he said, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And I found that story challenging. And I think about that story every time I think about this text, because, in some respects, Mike, we are far removed from idol worship, at least the way you see it in scripture, whether you think about the golden calf in Exodus or you think about Paul in Athens and you see idol worship everywhere. We don't see a lot of people at 5 o'clock in the morning in their front yards, completely on hands and knees, bowing down before a little golden statue. But I think you would agree, there's idol worship everywhere, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there's idol worship, whether it be money or sex or family, or anytime even good things can become ultimate things. And so this is a very powerful and I think instructive text for us to consider. And specifically as we think about what is the church, what is our mission and what is our responsibility to introduce people to Jesus. There's people who are searching all around us. And so let's start Acts chapter 17, and just why don't you read for us? You have it, verse 16, and go 16 through 21.
All right. Acts 17, 16 to 21. Now, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and in the marketplace, and every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicureans and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him, and some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities, because he was preaching of Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him, and they brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new teaching is and what you are presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. Now, all the Athenians and the foreigners who live there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new.
Nice. So we see Paul's on a journey. He's been in Thessalonica, he's been in Berea, and now he's in Athens. And it doesn't really seem like he was planning to be here. It just says in verse 16, he was waiting for his companions to join him. And so now he's just kind of looking around. and then things just start to happen.
Well, it says his spirit was provoked
Yeah.
within him. And while he's just kind of tapping his feet in the marketplace, waiting along, something triggers him.
Yeah, he just feels a burden or a passion. Yeah, that word provoked is pretty intense. He's not just like, well, this is interesting. Like he feels some anger, I think. He feels some, this isn't right.
Yeah, there's a certain presence he has where he's looking at the world around him and he's experiencing the world around him. And he's not just having a peace that surpasses understanding in the sense of that he's now transcending above all earthly interactions, but he's letting his environment have an effect on him and he's responding to his immediate surroundings. I think that's really that's really challenging.
Yeah, it makes me think of Jesus, and I might have the chapter wrong, but I think it's like Matthew 9, Matthew 10, when he sees the crowds and he says they're walk around like sheep without a shepherd.
Yeah, he was moved.
Moved, right? He had compassion on them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so I think this begs the question, like, what happens in our own hearts, in our own spirits, as we look at a world who are following all sorts of different gods and different idols.
It makes me think of Jesus's words of there's a narrow way that leads to life, and those who find it are few. And then there's the broad path that leads to destruction, and those who take it are many. And I think, at least for myself, that there's a tendency to want to just kind of camp in one of those, like one of those views, instead of accepting both are true, because especially when it comes to like evangelism of sorts, there's this mindset of we're going to go and convert the entire world tomorrow. We're going to go out in this door knock campaign or this new ministry and thing, and like flocks of people and hordes of people are going to come jump in on this. And it says broad is the path, and the people that are going to take theirs are many. And so there's a idea of like, well, actually most of the world's going to burn, and so you kind of cut your losses and know that there's only the narrow is the way, and those who find it are few. And so there's like it can be like a pessimism of thinking of we're the few faithful and we're going to be behind enemy lines and just hang on till the end. And like we got our ducks in the row, and most people are going to reject. And so there can be kind of a defeatism or pessimism that comes from that. The poor will always be with you. There's kind of a negativity. And I think what's important to have is you have to have a real balance of knowing that there are few that are going to choose, and so you don't want to detach yourself from the sadness of the rejection of Jesus. Kind of like Jesus weeping over Jerusalem when he sees it. He's like, this is not how it ought to be, and he has this weeping moment. So you have to have this hope that there's good news to bring to people, but that has to be not tempered, but just like paired with the realism and the sadness that there is going to be a lot of rejection. So there's a naivety of thinking that the entire world is going to seek him. There's also a naivety in thinking that no one's going to seek him. And so you really have to have the wisdom for both those.
It's crazy because the same Jesus who says there's a narrow way also says in the verse I just referenced about they're like sheep without a shepherd, that's where he says that the harvest is plentiful.
Yeah.
The laborers are few.
Right.
It's like, do we believe that? Do we believe the harvest is plentiful? Do we believe there's actual sheep who are just longing for direction and protection? And, how does that change your mindset and your willingness to participate in what God is up to? And it makes me also think of 2 Peter 3 when Peter's addressing these scoffers, he calls them, who are rejecting the coming return of Jesus. And he looks back at the flood. He's like, don't you know that like God has stepped into history before? He's going to do it again. But then he talks about to the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. And then he says in verse 9 that he desires all to come to repentance. And so it seems what Peter's arguing is that the reason Jesus hasn't come back yet is not because God is apathetic and lazy.
He's patient.
He's patient.
And he's wanting everyone to have as much opportunity as possible.
Every day is a gift
Yeah.
for one more soul to come to him. And so, that's an optimistic spirit that God has, that Jesus has. And so I'm going to delay because if I return, we're done.
Yep.
Right. So I'm going to hold off because there's more who's coming. And so yeah, I think that you're right. That really we should question ourselves. Where is our heart? Where is our motives? Where do we believe in people the way God believes in them? And it's amazing because some of what Paul does is very specific and structured. He knows I'm going to go to this place, I'm going to go to the synagogue, and I'm going to go preach here. And in Athens, it sort of just happens. Like it's really the Spirit leading Paul in this way, where he's just waiting for them. He's looking around. But I think that's instructive. That not everything is planned. I think you need to have your
Mm.
eyes open and to sort of invite and ask and petition God to remove the scales from your eyes so you can see properly. Because I think, it says, you almost you don't have to say it, because if, especially now for the original audience, they know Athens is full of idols, kind of like, thanks, Captain Obvious. He's like, he saw that it's full of idols. But even that word to see, that verb, he saw, um, there's multiple words for the action of seeing, but this one sort theoreo, where we get the word theorize or perceive. So it's not even just like, oh, I see there's idols, but like he perceives and sees that the city is gripped with idols.
I think it's so important for, Christians to put themselves out there at least somewhat routinely. And I saw a picture once of like a city set on a hill, cannot be hidden. And then the picture that I was shown, that was a city set on like a cliff side where it's so high up, but it's also like inaccessible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we kind of want to retreat into
Yeah.
our safety
Yeah.
and our wholesomeness. But if you're circling up the wagons all the time, you're never going somewhere.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, it was not like new information for Paul to be like, Athens has idols? How dare they?
Mm-hmm.
But to be in the midst of them and to witness, it's the difference between like the knowledge about something and the knowledge of something.
Yeah.
Now he's experiencing, being saturated by lost people,
Mm-hmm.
and like the Lord, having and experiencing lostness around him. He's not now throwing Bibles at everyone. There's a compassion and wanting to help be a blessing to them, and I think that's something we definitely need to have.
Yeah. About 10 years ago, I was able to visit Athens. I was chaperoning a group, actually a youth mission trip from Anchorage to Bulgaria, and we hopped over to Greece for a day or two. We went to ancient Corinth, which I just heard that they're doing approved this huge excavation of ancient Corinth, which has been like off limits for a while. So, some amazing discoveries to be had, I think, in the coming years. But in Athens, I just remember being so moved. We went up to, you know, when you go to Greece or you go to the Holy Land, to Israel, the tourists know, like if why you're coming over, or that tour guides, so you always have to take with a grain of salt. Like this is exactly where Jesus ate breakfast. It's like, well, do we know that? But there's a lot that we do know, and we were on what was most probably Mars Hill, where Paul delivered this message and had this discussion here, in the Areopagus. And I just remember standing there, and you can see over the city, which was huge, at least modernly, and you can look up, and the very top of the hill was the Parthenon. And the shadow of the Parthenon was like over us, like our shadow, our shade was from the Parthenon. And it was just like a visual image for me to think, like, man, thinking about this idea of Paul's emotional, he's being provoked because the city's gripped with idols. I felt that there. Like the Parthenon is just looming over everybody.
It's like destroy every lofty often it's like
Yeah.
actually above you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but the reason I bring that up is because that's so obvious. But I think if we have eyes to see and ears to hear, we're going to see that all around us today, and wherever we find ourselves, whether it's in Alaska, whether it's in somewhere else in the United States, a different country, like the idea of idolatry, counterfeit gods are
Well,
all around us.
well, that's where he is like the Great Commission. The first two letters are so essential. Where
Mm-hmm.
you go
Mm-hmm.
into all the world, and so then it's as you're going. Paul is. You don't just make appointments to do the
Yeah.
Great Commission,
Yeah.
but there's also you have to get out of your front door, and as soon as you get off the couch, you're now in a state of going,
Mm-hmm.
and there's going to be things that happen in that state of going that you're not going to anticipate, but you need to be prepared for.
Yeah, that's right. And so his response then, I mean, he's provoked. He doesn't retreat, like you said. He doesn't feel defeated and say, well, broad is the way to destruction. Yeah.
Bummer.
And then let's go move on. He steps forward, and I think there's some things we can learn here about, okay, how do we address our neighborhoods when they're gripped with idols? Says he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons. So we know that's part of Paul's strategy, to the Jew first, and then to the Greek. Goes to synagogues in many towns he visits. Oftentimes they don't hear him or refuse to listen. And so then he moves towards the Gentiles. That's sort of his missionary strategy. Then it says, and in the marketplace, every day with those who happen to be there. So again, what you're saying, like it's not just everything's formalized, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. He's going around, and if that person happened to be there, we're going to reason.
That's just so challenging to make us do some internal investigation, like heart check, because I think we become so callous, we become so routine, and it's just asking ourselves, am I the type of person to be provoked by someone's lost state?
Yeah.
And it's like someone once told me that the worst time to have a heart attack is during a game of charades.
Yeah.
Because you're just flopping on the ground and someone's looking at you and they think you're playing a game and you're like, fish out of water. Yeah. And you're trying to guess it, and then they stop moving, and by the time you figure out it's not a game anymore, they're dead.
Yeah.
And it's kind of morbid, but the idea is like people are actually dying,
Yeah.
and we're just not perceiving things as they really are.
Yeah.
And so
This ain't a game.
it's not a game. And so being provoked is knowing what's actually on like if you saw a little kid wandering in the forest,
Mm-hmm.
lost, or like a kid in the supermarket somewhere that's like looking around, that's like clearly looking for something, they're not where they belong, you have to be a pretty evil person to be like, that survive or die, kid.
Yeah,
like you got to be provoked to have compassion to help them go to where they belong.
I just saw a video yesterday where, this, it's a short or whatever. I think it was on YouTube or something, but it was this guy they had a camera set up and they were doing some tests to see how people would respond. And you have this little kid in front of this door, and you have a lot of people walking back and forth in this alleyway.
Oh, is it like the fake kidnapping
Yes,
one?
did
Oh,
you see
yeah,
it?
I did see that.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
They would take the kid, and then some people just kept walking.
Right.
And then others kind of just looked, noticed, and then kept walking.
That's so messed up.
I had to turn it off. I read some of the comments and said there were some superheroes.
There was definitely some real good people.
But it made me so sick. Just even one person doing that, where like this is like a 5-year-old child, and they're just,
oh yeah,
and they don't know they just, and it's like a aggressive, full around the back,
oh yeah,
hand over the face, and run.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And they just kept walking.
Yeah, and don't want to mess with that.
Yeah,
it's like stage real life, Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
But even more so. But you have like Levites and priests who should be the ones to jump in.
Yeah.
Just like keep walking. Like I got places to be, or I don't want to soil my hands or whatever. But then there are some people that really do jump in, and that type of that's not something you just like. That's a decision you make beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And it reveals what type of person you are when you're faced with that type of stuff.
Yeah, and it's I feel shame with it because the video provoked me. But to what your point is, the same things, worse things are happening in people's spiritual lives.
And it's really easy to be an armchair quarterback Christian.
Yeah.
When to be like, oh, well, they totally could have whatever, but we're going to be tested. As we're going, we're going to be put in situations to be provoked, or you can just choose to keep your head down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like the third talent servant in the parable of just like, oh, I'm kind of scared.
Yeah. I find it challenging too, because he's doing this in the marketplace. And again, this is maybe something hard for us to get our minds around, because the market, Athens was like the cultural capital of the world, wasn't the actual capital anymore after Rome said no to Greece. But still, culture wise, I mean, that's where art and language and poetry and the marketplace was like the center of everything. Like you could find not only temples, but you could find courts, you could find theaters, you could find shops, you could find everything you know, just in one area. And now we have a lot of things more segmented. I'm going to go down to this street over here where this business over here. I can order this online. But here it's like, so not only is not only is everything there, but every type of person is there. And I think in this type of place, you're going to see the ways that idolatry is now like has its webs and vines all around the people. Like it's not just like one temple that's like teaching false religion and everyone else is doing their own thing. Like it's everywhere in art, in culture, like in culture you have all these threads and assumptions and worldviews that, you know, Paul is just whoever happens to be there, we're gonna talk, we're gonna reason. But that's where the mission of God has brought him. He finds himself in Athens. He's waiting for his friends. He's provoked in his spirit. He goes to the synagogue like he normally does, but then he goes to the marketplace every day. And we see different philosophers there, Epicurean, Stoic philosophers. And what does this babbler wish to say? But this is also a place where a lot of people are exchanging ideas. But I just feel, I say all that to say I find a challenge of like, you're talking about go, right? Like, go, we're supposed to go where people are. And oftentimes we sort of have a backwards mindset where we have more of an attractional model. Like, we're going to make the church very attractive for people to come to. And I don't think it's a bad thing as far as it depends what you mean by attractive. I don't mean like light shows and stuff and being so seeker sensitive where you're compromising the gospel, but you should be really thinking about the visitor who's among you, the guest who's among you, and people who are seeking. There's a lot of fish who jump in the boat, and so you want to do life in a way that people are attracted to that. But you see this sort of like where are people and where are idols, and are you going there? Right.
We just got done dip netting here in Alaska
Yeah.
yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and my family, we got 55 fish for us, red salmon,
Nice.
and on the boat we were on, we got like 90 something. But they just had a record. We have a church group, Gone Bonkers Fish
Mhm.
Camp, which is awesome. We should do a whole episode about them sometime.
Yeah.
But we literally, with the dip netting, caught so many fish. But at the end of the day, the fish started jumping out of the water more. And one of the salmon actually jumped on the dock as we were there, and I had to boot it back into the water gently. And I was just thinking of being fishers of men, trying to connect with
Yeah.
fish. And if we're just trying to be around them, waiting for them to jump in the boat, as you're saying, um, it does happen. I saw it happen. I could have picked up that fish that was on the dock. I don't know if that would have counted as a catch. I don't know if I scooped him off the dock with my net. I don't know if that counted as dip
Found
netting.
it.
Yeah, it found me. It found my net. But that's kind of like a horrible way of thinking of waiting for them to find our nets.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to get stuff in the water
Yeah.
to go in, and then you are trying to bring them in, but if you're not putting lines in the water or nets in the water, that's at the very least very poor stewardship of the opportunities God gives us.
Yeah, for sure. And I find it really instructive and powerful to think about what was the substance of Paul's message, because what and I think a lot of people can tend to struggle with is when you're provoked in your spirit by idol worship and you see the way it's invested into one's culture, and then what the temptation is to be all about culture wars. And I think the church got caught up in that,
Oh,
where
for sure.
you see that online all the time, especially every 4 years in the political season. Either way, no matter who's up for office, like that seems to be when things even kind of come to the surface, where for whatever issue or whatever social challenge is going on, it's like the church wants to be right instead of trying to win souls. But for Paul, so he said, these philosophers conversing with him, some are like, what's this babbler got to say? Others say he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. And I don't know, I just think, how much is the resurrection of Jesus specifically central to our message?
I think it has to be absolutely central,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of different people out there promoting good ideas, a lot of different pacifists and people that promote this idea of peace or stability or rightness. But the resurrection of Jesus is the game changer.
Mm-hmm.
It is the verification and the sign that Jesus wasn't just the Mr. Rogers of the ancient world.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. He's more than just a friendly old neighbor. Yeah, he has some hard teachings.
And he was crucified not because he said, love your neighbor as yourself. He was crucified because he said, I and the Father are one.
Yeah.
And I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father but through me.
Yeah.
And it's those types of exclusive, capital T, truth claims that make him not coexisting with any other belief or worldview.
Yeah, his gospel was the gospel of the kingdom of God. And in a world that has a lot of kings fighting one another.
And no one has resurrected like Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's what makes him this new teaching,
Mm-hmm.
is somebody, not just from like way far away from a long time ago, but we have this recorded conversation of people in real time dealing with this local guy, relatively local guy, with people being witnesses of him actually being crucified by the government,
Mm-hmm.
and then being recorded, verifiably raised,
Yeah.
and having, of course, everyone's conversion and their transformation and everything that follows through that. So this is, the gospel is recent good news.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting to see it happening.
Yeah. What I'm planning to do tomorrow in my sermon, and as people listening to this, especially if they heard my sermon, they can say if I did or not. But my plan is to kind of move using this as a roadmap for thinking about how do we as the church introduce Jesus to a searching world. That's kind of like the guiding question for it. And what I'm doing is just looking at what Paul did, and we've covered it, but the idea of like walking around the neighborhood. I think there needs to be you need to be out of your own house, your own building, your own comfort zone, and be just walking around the marketplace. But then step 2 is identifying idols, perceiving, seeing the idols. But the third thing, most importantly, is connecting people to Jesus, specifically his resurrection. Makes me think of a conversation I had down in Tennessee with someone who was seeking, who was thinking about committing herself to Christ, but wasn't all the way there yet. And she was very analytical, had a lot of, like me, we're very similar in that, and had a lot of questions. So what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And a lot of hang-ups about the way things were done in church, the way certain passages, or there's just a lot of questions. She's like there's like a list of 20 that she's really trying to wrestle with, and I commended for that. I said these are great questions, but you have one question you have to answer first, and that was, is Jesus raised from the dead or not?
Oh yeah, it's the hinge point of all of the Bible.
Yeah.
And that's what 1 Corinthians is all about.
Right.
If that didn't happen, then we're the most to be pitied. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's the mere Christianity approach from Lewis, right? And it's liberating because there's a lot of questions I still have. If you die without questions, you weren't searching, right? But the point is, I may have a lot of questions, but I know that Jesus was raised from the dead, and that's going to tether me. You're in Hebrews, right? The anchor of our souls at the right hand of God.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the rope and the tether you're holding on to. And so that, I don't know, I'm just challenged because it's easy when you're talking to people who are outside of Christ to really get hung up and focused on, the substance of the cultural issue, the cultural questions, rather than the resurrection of Jesus. And then once you establish that, then you can address the implications of what does it mean for Jesus to be raised from the dead and being thrown on high? Well, that's going to now affect the way you live in this way, this way, this way, this way. And so, but they're seeking, and it says they took him and brought him to the Areopagus. It's a place where philosophers exchange ideas. May we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting? You brought some strange things to our ears. I just love the way it's phrased. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing else except telling and hearing something new.
So they didn't have, like, it seems, the purest motives
No.
of like, we are lost and desperate for love and truth.
Mm-hmm.
Please, we starve for this lifestyle you are presenting before us. They're kind of like bored and wanting to get like, what notification do we get for this just in? Can I get this fix of something? And also had this idea of like babbler. And so I'm thinking about being provoked and being in the marketplace and putting yourself out there going. is you need to have some thick skin of knowing that some people are going to think you're a babbler and get bored with you
Mm-hmm.
and then reject you. But amongst that, there's going to be some truth seeking.
Yeah.
There's going to be some of that soil that takes that seed and it's going to really find root. And so knowing that those things are all going to happen, trusting that there is going to be acceptance and there is going to be rejection, and being prepared and anticipating both those things. Because if you think of just one or the other, everyone's going to reject me, so why even go? Or if you think everyone's going to listen, and then, rejection.
One person rejects you, and
Yeah,
you're devastated.
exactly. And then you think, I'm a bad representative of Christ. And you take it personally and thinking like, if only I could have communicated clearer or became better friends with them, or if only I just, built up a better relationship, or only if I had studied more and stuff. And I think there's a certain level of preparation we need to have, in prayer and
Sure.
but it's okay to not know every answer in the moment, but having I don't know, people rejected Jesus when he was sitting with them, and you're not going to out-represent Jesus than Jesus himself.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding, we have a friend, Ben, maybe I shouldn't have said his name, whatever. And he,
You can bleep it out.
yeah, that's true. I have the power. But do you remember him telling you about his rejection therapy?
Yes.
Where he would just walk around town, ask people ludicrous things. I don't remember, someone was like, "Hey, can you give me your car?" And just so he could get used to people telling him no. And we're so afraid of like people not liking us or judging us or just thinking we're weird or babbler. And peer pressure is so, I think we really have to point out how strong of a force desiring to be acceptable by others really is.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think of the only time we see an apostle with the Spirit, after Pentecost, sin is over this, with Peter having to get rebuked by Paul because he was sitting with the Gentile Christians, and then when the Jewish party arrived to whatever gathering they had, he withdraws from the Gentiles, right? And then Paul looks at that and is like, "Oh, red flag," and rebukes him to his face as he stood condemned. And I just point that out to just highlight kind of what an uphill battle it is to overcome the social pressures of our environment. And us trying to be provoked, to be messengers of the good news, that to just recognize the giant you are stepping up to confront is this peer pressure, social pressures, cultural pressures, that those are pretty big mountains needed to be moved, because Peter himself stumbled with that.
Yeah. So what are, off the top of your head, some good, just like actionable steps one could take for their own like rejection therapy? Maybe not some, off the wall things the links he would go to, maybe just do that. But just what are some, because I feel that.
Oh yeah.
I feel that, like, if I'm in my environment with people that I know, I'm willing to have any conversation. But if I'm a fish out of water, if I'm in a different context, I'm visiting somewhere that I don't know anybody, it's going to be much more tempting to just sort of zip your lips and not speak. But, what are some, if someone wanted to grow in their confidence in speaking to people who are not Christians about Jesus, what advice would you give them?
I think that one of the first things is prayer. You got to figure out, look in the mirror and figure out like who and whose are you. And you just got to get that locked in. You're going to stumble and struggle with that. But at the end of the day, you got to go to bed at night thinking about, what type of person am I? Am I God's person, or am I my own person? And you got to have that locked in. Secondly, you got to not go alone. And so I'm trying to look at the context here. I'm just trying to ascertain if Paul is actually alone during this time when he's at the marketplace. But even if he was alone during this, that's not his normal mode of ministry. He usually has Barnabas or Silas or Timothy or Titus or, Luke or Mark. He has like a crew with him, because the fear of rejection is a lot less daunting if you have close friends with you and
Yeah.
it all, and like, you know what, even if you don't like me, if you don't think I belong, I know I belong with these guys over here.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that, I don't want to say safety net, but having that fortification of the church, which is not just Sunday, but it's the people in your community that go with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that gives you a lot of courage. Kind of it reminds me of like Gideon having Purah with him, which Gideon, this person that in the Bible, an angel calls him mighty warrior when he's hiding inside of a wine press. And you see Gideon's great, story of faith. But in Judges 7, you see him have this friend that kind of comes out of nowhere named Purah.
Mm-hmm.
And God tells him, if take Purah with you, if you will, to go down into the Midianites there. And then Gideon takes Purah to go with him. And it just reinforces this recurring theme that we really need people to go with us through things. So the first one is know who you are. Second thing, don't go alone.
Yeah.
And then third thing, don't give up.
Yeah.
You look at Paul's life and all the disciples' lives, and they have great moments of like spiritual harvest, and they also have great moments of spiritual testing, of prison and rejection, death, stoning, shipwreck. And so you got to understand it's an adventure.
Yeah.
And adventures sound awesome afterwards.
Yeah.
But when you're in the middle of it, it can be a wild ride and just kind of like a roller coaster. The only people that really get hurt are those that get off before the ride's over.
Yeah.
So being a disciple of Jesus is the most extreme adventure you could ever go on.
Yeah.
And there's going to be highs and lows. So just kind of know what you're signing up for.
Mm-hmm.
You can't plan for everything that's going to happen, but you have to have a mindset of stepping out in faith no matter what happens. So there's a certain confidence you have to have of knowing, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's powerful, and I think the idea of having a friend is huge. I don't know where we get this. There's so many different things in our faith that we're very content with. Like, oh, we're okay with doing this in community. We pray together, we sing together, we study scripture together. But for some reason, at least maybe it's just me, but with evangelism, it's like, how are you doing with your personal evangelism? It's like Jesus sent him out in twos. Sometimes he sent him out in 72s, But it's just the idea of like, okay, make that very practical. Like, who's my like evangelism friend? Like, who's my evangelism teammate? And I think obviously it's great if you're married for you and your spouse to learn how to communicate the gospel together. But then, additional to that, find someone else. Like, and on Tuesdays we're gonna go out and we're gonna go talk to people. I think just make that super practical, and I think that infuses a lot of confidence. And I think making prayer central, not just to like what happens before, I think that's huge. I think learning how to pray regularly, Lord, give me eyes to see, give me eyes to see, give me eyes to see. And he will always answer that prayer. But then also, like, I think prayer is an on-ramp for conversations for people. I think there's a lot of people, not everybody, but if you just ask, hey, is there anything I can pray for? The waitress who's waiting on your table, the person you bump into. We had disciple trips up here a few weeks ago, but then the year before they had like a prayers for anything table they set up in the park here in Wasilla, and that's all it said. This was a little banner that said prayers for anything, and you had people coming just saying like, yeah, man, I'm going through this divorce right now, or my child is super sick, or so there's sheep. They're like sheep without a shepherd, and so that's a great starting point for introducing conversations and then going from there.
Well, I think Jesus' words to his disciples about making them fishers of men is so wise, because you can block off time in your schedule to go fishing, but you can't make an appointment to catch a fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
That's good.
You can't know when something's gonna take that line, but you can cast 1,000 times, and you can't say, I know the 735th cast we got a big one. And there's gonna be some that get away. There's gonna be that. There's this. You gotta keep putting things out there, but you have to choose to go to be gone fishing.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen, but you also don't know how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you have to know that the Spirit is working on people in ways you don't see.
Yeah.
And that you are being positioned, they're being positioned to have this point of contact. It's not just this marketing technique we're trying to optimize as the church. There's the forces at work to make this happen. And even though Paul was provoked here, there was a spirit in him to be provoked, as well as a spirit to have him be at that place at that time. So there's just a lot of forces at work for these moments to take place. So that gives me a lot of inspiration to be more sensitive to our circumstances we find ourselves in, knowing that there's actually some destiny to these moments.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that point about idea of fishing. Sometimes you don't catch something.
It doesn't mean you're a bad fisherman necessarily.
Yeah. It's reminds me of that old Chuck Norris joke. Like Chuck Norris doesn't go fishing, he goes catching. It's like, no, we don't go catching. We're not catchers of men. We're fishers of men. And sometimes there's a catch. Sometimes there's a big catch. Sometimes there's thousands in one day. We see that in Acts 2. But it's the faithful act of casting that we are about.
Accountants don't just I caught a fish on accident.
Yeah.
You have to try to get out in the water.
Exactly. And that's huge. And I just find that, that's the main text that I'm thinking through for tomorrow, as far as just where are our hearts and our spirits as we think about stepping out into participating in God's mission. And the rest of this chapter, you see some of the results. And I love in verse 22, but we'll kind of come to an end here just thinking about this idea of an unknown God, that I think, so he looks around and Paul's strategy here is super wise, because his approach is very different, I imagine, than when he was in the synagogues and he could appeal to, well, don't you know what Leviticus chapter 12 says? And that's my default as a Bible nerd, to someone who doesn't know the difference between, Leviticus and Revelation, and just to say, well, don't you know the Bible says da 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 da? It's no. We have to meet people where they are, identify where they are, and use that as a starting point to then connect to Jesus. And he says, he starts on a positive note in some ways. He says, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. The King James says, I believe you are too superstitious. Makes me think of, we won't get into all this, but there's some language here that he's borrowing from Aristotle, where Aristotle talks about sort of this range from piety to superstition, and the way he defines each, and kind of finding a golden mean there. So in a very less wise way, Michael Scott, I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious.
A little stitious.
Well, Christians were accused of being atheists, or not pious enough, not stitious enough, where you only believe in one God. That's crazy. But that's what Paul's claiming, to a city full of idols, full of different ideas, different gods, different philosophies, and everyone's just content with just pontificating, about the new thing, the new idea. He's as a knife through butter, just coming in and saying, actually, I see over here you have all these gods. You even have one just to cover your bases. That's how superstitious you are to this inscription to the unknown God. Let me tell you about him. Actually, he's the creator of everything. Jesus raised from the dead. He's actually the only God,
Well, you have cultures that have honorable and dishonorable traits, and there's some different ratios and threads of them. And I think he's highlighting and connecting with them on an honorable trait that they have of, I perceive in every way that you are very religious. For as I pass along and observe the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. And he goes on to explain who this God is. But he is so connecting, and he's saying you're already worshiping this God.
Yeah.
And I'm now going to reveal what you claim is unknown. And so he's meeting them with this hunger of something new. He's like, well, boy, do I have something new for you. And you then have this drama of some people not believing, but also a lot of people also believing.
Yeah.
And so there's a sensitivity to the people around you that is so important in going, is knowing as you're going who you come across and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, and I think applying that today to keep going with that idea, I think about Tim Keller's strategy, church planning in Manhattan of all places, and back in the late '90s, and part of his strategy, he called it like the subversive gospel. It's like, what do you do with as you're trying to plant a church in a city that just rife with counterfeit gods and idols? And he's like identifying, in the language of this text, identifying the unknown God, and identifying that inner longing, that thing that one person is worshiping. Many people are worshiping good things, but they made those things ultimate. And so, it's like identifying where people are putting their hope and their trust in. Maybe it's in a career path, or maybe it's in a family, or maybe it's in a hobby, or maybe it's in a whatever, demonstrating, hey, you're helping reveal the truth of the matter to them. And starting where they are in an honorable trait and saying, like, man, I see the way you love your family, but demonstrating how, unless the gospel of the resurrection of Jesus comes into your life, into your worldview, that's going to crush you. It's not going to give you life. Only God can, like, this is the only God who will die for you. Everything else wants you to die for it. I think that's pagan worship 101, is like, you die for it. You die for, and our God says, no, I'm going to die for
Well, that's
you.
because all these other gods, indirectly, they're explaining something very, very vital and important for us to understand. By them worshiping all these other gods and then including this unknown God, they are making a statement that's true for all of us, is that these other gods aren't enough.
Mm-hmm.
They're not enough. If they were enough, you wouldn't need this altar to this unknown God.
Yeah.
But there's this little corner in the back of their minds that they recognize, okay, there's something else, and just to be thorough or to be safe, we're going to include that. But whether it's Zeus or Aphrodite or Athena or any of these other gods, there's still, maybe they're very like satisfying to them in some ways, but they're not completely fulfilling, or else they wouldn't really need these other things
Mm-hmm.
there. So, like to your point about family or career or freedoms, like those are important things, but they don't totally fill up the cup.
Yeah.
There's something missing, and the thing that's missing actually fills up the entire cup, not
Mm-hmm.
just tops it off,
Yeah, yeah.
but actually fills up all that family and freedom and all
Exactly.
these other things you value. Those values come from his design, not from them inherently being like supreme.
Yeah, that's good. So as we come to a close, just thinking, verse 22 through 34, right into the chapter, as Paul is delivering this message to the men of Athens, he kind of emphasizes three major things. One is that this unknown God, he's actually the creator God. So that's one place we camp out, that the God that we serve is the creator of all. And that's
Yeah.
why the Bible starts with the creator God.
Yeah, kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. Constantly referring to him, because if he's the creator, that means he's the sustainer and provider, and he's all powerful and he's invested, and like that's essential to our message. And then he talks about a sin problem that we have with this creator God. He talks about former times he winked at sin or overlooked, but now calls all to repentance. And then the resurrection of Jesus. And that's like the biggest thing he's really focusing on. I mean, that's what we already read. Like, that's the message he's preaching, is that Jesus has been raised from the dead. And then we see, as you said earlier, that some people were, when they heard the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, others said, "We'll hear you again about this." And Paul went out from their midst. So just thinking about our message, first of all, it's contextual. He's in the marketplace. He's reasoning with people. He's looking. He's discerning. He's asking questions. So sometimes I get trapped into this sort of cookie cutter mindset of like, I got the 5 steps of salvation. So I'm just gonna yell at people. Knock knock. Are you going to heaven or hell if you die tonight? It's like every person different. Every fish is different. Every sheep is different. Whatever metaphor you want to use. So he's reasoning with people, whoever happened to be there. And I think we have to spend time. We're in the people business. I think about, um, you ever done you like to people watch? You just
Oh
go
yeah.
to people, you just kind of sit down on a bench and you just watch. You can learn a lot about someone just by observing them. Sort of like a spiritual people watching, where
Mm-hmm.
it's just like based off of like where are they spending their time, how are they investing their money, what questions are they asking, what longings are they revealing? Like the more you get to watch someone, and if you are praying constantly about that person and you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you're going to learn a lot about those inner longings. And that's going to equip you then to connect them to Jesus and his resurrection more than just sometimes we're starting at the wrong place because we assume based off of what I've seen about this person after talking to them for 2 minutes that this is what you need. And actually, they have this question over here, they have this burden over here, or whatever. And so, spending time with people, praying for people, but then rooting it in Creator God and hope in the resurrection. And if we can camp out there, all the other questions will start to come under that umbrella.
What really challenges me from this is wanting to just think about, am I the type of person where evangelism is unplanned
Mm-hmm.
because he's just waiting at the marketplace in this time? So
Yeah.
evangelism is not a campaign or a mission trip.
Yeah.
It can be those things. But in this case, this example, we see evangelism, this ministry is unplanned.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, am I a type of person that can be provoked to speak the truth unplanned?
Mm-hmm.
So that first kind of sets a good character test on myself. The second thing is that he's brought before this Areopagus, which is like this seemingly prestigious,
Mm-hmm.
like it would be like you and I being called up on like CNN or some like
Yeah.
major news network where the world is
Mm-hmm.
now listening, asking us questions, and just
What
thinking,
does this babbler have to say?
yeah, but also like we're curious. You
Yeah.
have some sort of new message, and how much would you and I prepare for getting
so
to
much.
talk,
Yeah.
State of the Union or
Mhm.
like it's late night talk show or something, and we'd be sweating over that a lot. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, to just tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember what there's a Greek or Roman general that said, you don't have to defend the truth. The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend the truth. The truth can defend itself.
Mm.
And just be people of the truth, and not the powers in the message, not the messenger.
Yeah, that's right.
And just have a simplicity of Jesus is God, and he came and he was resurrected. And if you'd like to know more, let's talk.
Yeah.
And if that interests you, encourage that pursuit of that truth. But it's not about you just trying to like me and me getting accepted. It's about, is Jesus worth knowing about?
Yeah.
So being unplanned, provoked, and then being able to be prepared. There's some preacher alliteration.
I like it.
Yeah. And just thinking of what would you say if we were called, because I almost feel like there's some of that pessimism of like my Bible would just like disintegrate showing up like on like some worldly major talk show. But no, like God's gonna put you in places to bring the truth. And thankfully, there's going to be a lot of unplanned moments to be light.
Yeah.
And to accept that, and to know that the Lord is the one that's taking these places. It's not about you trying to control everything.
Yeah. So trust in the message, not the messenger.
That's right.
Even Paul himself, 1 Corinthians, was it 2, 3? I think it's 2. I didn't come to you with words of eloquent wisdom.
But to deliver to you what was the first most important, right?
Well, that's first importance in chapter 15. But they come with you words of eloquent wisdom, but in a demonstration of the Spirit.
That's right.
Right. So like, it's he's the one who is. It's his mission. It's his message. We are but instruments, right? And so we just need to be faithful and say, let's do it. And so it makes me think, and maybe it's a good way for us to sign off. Just thinking of who was the guy that taught at Sunset, passed away, his evangelism guy, Jerry Tolman.
Yeah, Jerry Tolman.
Yeah, I remember him teaching us our evangelism class, and he said, his definition of evangelism, he had a couple. One was just one beggar telling another beggar where bread is. But the other one always stuck with me. He said, telling people what you know about Jesus. So telling people maybe you got to meet more people. If you run out of people, go spend some time in the marketplace and find people. But tell people and then what you know.
Yeah.
You're always learning. But if you know that Jesus was raised from the dead, and if that's what you've committed your life to, you know enough.
Yeah. If you're a Christian, you then have beautiful feet to other people to tell them how to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being part of this episode. Let's be sure to be in prayer to be people that are provoked to spread the news, and pray for us in this podcast. And we'll see you guys next time.